36 viewers.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Defend Europa TV. You're listening to Radio Europa episode 25, and tonight we're joined by Darren and Laura from England, as well as Boris from Croatia. Hi, guys.
Hello.
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 So we've got an interesting show tonight. We're going to discuss the rise of Vox, a new nationalist party in Spain, as well as the ongoing escalation of the Yellow Gilet protests in France. Before we begin, I just want to take a moment to thank everybody for getting us over the 1,000 subscribers mark. Thanks for tuning in, sharing our links, really helpful, so keep doing it. If you'd like to keep supporting us in other ways as well, there's links in the description below for you to donate. We're very grateful if you do. Right, guys, let's get started. We'll begin with Vox because I think that's one of the more uplifting stories of the week, and everybody's always asking for white pills. So, Laura, can you get us started on that? For our audience who might not know much about Vox, can you tell us a little bit about their origins and what they stand for?
Yes, absolutely. So, hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. So, on Sunday, the Vox Party in Spain took 12 parliamentary seats in Andalusia. So, they were only expected to win 5, and they've won 12, so they've done really good. They're quite a new party. They were only formed in December 2013. And the Socialist Party has ruled in Andalusia for the last 36 years. They only won 33 seats this time, and it was 47 last time in 2015. So they're losing support and the right are gaining support. 55 seats are needed to govern the area. So the left, including the Socialist Party, don't actually have enough to form a coalition to govern. So it looks like the right are going to go ahead and do that, hopefully. So Andalusia is obviously right at the bottom of Spain, just above Morocco. So it's the first point of contact for all the migrants, which might give you an idea as to why they're kind of turning to the right now. But a little bit about the party. They are calling for tougher calls on immigration, and they're kind of like your typical anti-jihad, anti-multiculturalism party. They're against the Catalonia independence, and they're a little bit more traditional than some of the other populist parties that we have in Europe because they're pro-life when it comes to abortion, and they're also against same-sex marriage. So they want to have a civil union title instead if it's 2 men or 2 women. And they also have soft Euroscepticism as well. So it's kind of difficult to find information about them online. It's not as easy as it was with like Liga in Italy or Le Pen's party in France, but they do look promising. Le Pen also tweeted her congratulations towards them when they did well in the election. So yeah, that's kind of all I've got for now.
Yeah, very interesting, very interesting. I know that Vox obviously split from the People's Party, so it's kind of different from in other European countries where you find that the establishment parties won't work with the nationalists. But in this case, I think they won't have that problem because they did split from the biggest centre-right party in Spain, which is very interesting. Darren, I'm going to go straight in for the kill with this one. Do you think do they have any Francoist elements? Are they that way inclined, or are they just a bit like other right-wing parties in Europe in their democratic foundation, shall we say?
I wouldn't say they're Francoist. I think they're more, as you say, along the lines of like the Spanish UKIP, AFD. I don't think they're going to start rounding people up and sticking them in cans.
That's a shame.
But no, I wouldn't say. I don't know. Probably not yet. Not explicitly. Give it time.
For anybody that was unsure, I was just kidding about the camps. Yeah, so I mean, obviously Spain is a very Catholic country, so I think that would explain their difference, their divergence from other European parties. Because, like with the Front National in France, I know France is a Catholic country, but there's a bit of a debate as to whether they're pro-life or not. And in Holland, the Freedom Party, they're a bit ambiguous where these parties stand. Boris, you come from a more pious country than the rest of us. Do you think the Catholicism in Spain is going to influence? Well, will it influence Spanish voters to turn to the traditionalist party like Vox?
High praise. Thank you. Well, I think it will. If we look at, well, if we just look continent-wise, we see that it sort of is the more, I guess, Catholic nations that are standing up to the current world order that is trying to form. We've got Hungary, we've got Italy, famously with Salvini, and we've got the smaller states like, well, Croatia and Slovenia. We're not in the news much, but we are definitely, us, in our case, Croatia and Slovenia, we're very young democracies. People forget that. So at least in our case, we are still very traditional, and Catholicism definitely helps with that because it's the most, I guess, traditional part of Christianity. So definitely, Catholic people are definitely more traditionally inclined, and that will play a role in Spain. And just one thing, a sort of interesting fact, and White Bill on Vox being elected, this is the first really right wing and not center of right of center, I mean, party to be elected in Spain in its modern democracy at all. Like, it's the first time. So it's a very big upset in the sort of leftist and center order that has reigned in Spain, and it is a sign of the changing times. And finally, this populist wave has come to Spain.
Yeah, because we always get this perception from the outside that Spain, well, the whole of the Iberian Peninsula is very leftist. Obviously, Portugal tends to be that way inclined, and since Franco, Spain has been as well. So it's definitely interesting to see that they're moving away from that eventually. I think with the realization of what replacement migration means, I think that's leading them to rethink their political allegiances. Now, Laura and Darren, I know you guys have looked into Vox a bit today and yesterday. I don't know if either of you will have been able to find this information, but I mean, do they seem to have a good, strong leader like Salvini or Nigel Farage or whatever, you know, Geert Wilders, that sort of figure who is very popular among the Spanish people, or is that information not really seeped through yet?
It seems to me like there's not much information at the moment. It's more that the people are reaching out to the party that's talking about culling immigration, because obviously with the Socialist Party being in charge for the last 30 odd years and all the migrants that have travelled up from Africa and Asia, it must have just been a nightmare. It's similar to Italy, I guess, because obviously they're on the southern coast as well. And they made a pretty quick move as well towards the right, didn't they? But if we look at the seats, the Socialist Party, who I said got 33 seats, and God, you're going to hear a Yorkshire accent try and speak Spanish now, but there's another left-wing party called Podemos-led Adelante Andalusia or something. So they've only got 50 seats between them, so it's not enough to form the coalition. But if we do look to the right, there's a People's Party who got 26, and the centre-right Ciudadanos, who won 21. So if we add them to Vox, it's 59 seats, so it's more than 55, so it's fine. But what I find interesting about that is usually parties won't side up with the ones that the mainstream media label far right, will they? Like in Sweden recently, nobody wanted to team up with the Sweden Democrats and the AFS and stuff. So I'm not sure if that's a sign that they're maybe a little bit weaker, because other kind of mainstream conservative parties are quite happy to team up with them, or I'm not sure if it's more of a case of they just want to be in power and that's the only option there. But it will be interesting to see how that works going forward.
Yeah, I think with the mainstream parties working with them, I guess in Spain, because Vox split away from the establishment centre-right party, you wouldn't have thought there'd be too much between them anyway. But I think as well, it's a pattern amongst the Mediterranean countries where establishment parties are not overly principled in who they'll work with. So in Greece, Syriza, for instance, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not, but they work with, to make up the numbers in parliament, they have like some quite radical nationalists, not Golden Dawn, but some other nationalists who occupy a couple of posts in the cabinet. And obviously in Italy, you've got the Five Star movement, which are effectively a centre-left movement, happily working with Salvini and the right-wing Nationalist League. So I think they seem to have a different conception of consensus governance in the Mediterranean countries. The other issue I want to get down on, obviously Spain has had a new prime minister in the last 12 months because the previous Conservative prime minister had to resign for one scandal or another. Now, the Spanish socialists are very weak in the Spanish parliament. I don't think they have a majority at all. They're having to work with separatist movements to govern effectively. When the next elections do come around, it'd be interesting to see, Darren, I don't know what you think about this, how Vox will fare. I mean, did you think they've got a chance of governing in a coalition with the centre-right party come the next Spanish elections?
Well, there's talk now that the election might be brought forward from 2020 if the minority government can't pass the budget. So if they want to stay in power, they're going to have to work together. Although hopefully the election will be brought forward, in which case Vox can then move up the rankings. Because I think it was in, bear me 1 second, trying to remember, a place called Abanol, wherever that is in Spain. They said that there wasn't one document posted through the doors. There wasn't any posters up advertising Vox. They literally got all their votes from word of mouth. And the nearest Vox meeting was about 75 kilometres away. And that's also a place where some African immigrants also support Vox because they came over, they've got their papers, they're legally entitled to work there, and they're also getting annoyed by the fact that people are coming in and even undercutting them. But no, I think if Vox can do this without as much publicity as the other parties, then by 2020 it will definitely increase.
Yeah, I hope so. And if it follows the pattern that we've seen in Italy, as the realities of migration from Africa, I mean, it's particularly African migration that has sparked this rise in nationalist sentiment, because that's the sort of migration that tends to grate on people the most. So once that reality becomes clearer, I think more people in Spain will turn to Vox. And like you said, if the election is brought forward, they should fare quite well. So it'll be very exciting to see what happens there. So I think we've done all we can do on that, really. So I want to get into the next topic, which is the yellow gilet.
Sorry, William. I should point out, it's a bit of trivia. Santiago Abascal, the leader of Vox, looks a lot like Salvini's brother. Maybe
he does. We'll have to see if we can get a picture of him up on the screen later on in the show, because it's always interesting to have these little pub quiz questions like that. So I think, right, now that we've got all the stuff with Vox out of the way, we'll move on to the yellow jersey protests, because we did cover them last week in a stream, but there's been more development since then. There's been an escalation in the particularly the burnings and the looting, and I'm hesitant to say violence, but there's been some clashes. So I think it's important that we do go into that. Boris, you looked into the yellow jersey protests a little bit. We've all seen the images of the police officers taking their helmets off in support of the protesters. Is that a widespread thing, or is that an isolated occurrence, or do the police generally support the protesters in this?
Well, there have been reports and video footage of just that same thing happening. I wouldn't say that the police are like 100% behind the protesters. I would say that they are doing this, taking their helmets off, in an act of sort of solidarity with the citizens, in the sense of de-escalating the violence. So by removing their helmets, they're symbolically showing the people that they trust them, and that to avoid violence, essentially. That's the biggest reason why they are doing this, because the sort of thing you hear the most, if you look into the situation, is all sides are calling for de-escalation. So that's that's that for the officers. And about the protests in general, the protests had their origin in this tax hike. And to understand the whole situation, we have to go into the past just a little bit. So a few months ago, Macron, he passed a tax. Well, not a tax. He actually took off a tax from the wealthy, and from that he got the moniker of the president of the rich. And since taking office, he has been not slandered because it's correct criticism. He has been dubbed as a person who is out of touch with the French public, and that's just showing up more and more now. And the protests are happening because of the fuel prices, which are getting hiked by about 6 euro cents. And that's actually quite a lot if you use your vehicle a lot, which in the rural parts of France, a lot of people do because the infrastructure is not as developed there. And this will affect people mostly in the rural areas. And that's why there are, in the whole country, there were about 100,000 protesters in the last protest. And in Paris alone, there were 8,000 people. And people are calling for change. And one thing that they have already gotten out of this is that the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, he put a moratorium on the tax, so a sort of stopgap measure to appease the protesters. And for now, there are more protests scheduled, and we will see what happens. But just one last thing I wanted to say, which is a perspective that I sort of have on this, is if we look back into the past a little bit to 2013 and 2014, when the Maidan quote-unquote revolution was happening in Ukraine, it's interesting to see how what the response from the West was on this, because there it was very similar. It was the people protesting the government's decision, and in the case of Ukraine, where there was a sort of changing of the guard, the West supported it. But here in France, when the people want change, the West doesn't support it. Interesting. And we have to note that Macron is one of the sort of pillars of the current neoliberal order and everything that entails, the globalist economy, the migration. So it's just an interesting sort of thing to look back on.
Yeah, well, you did my job for me. That's a very comprehensive rundown. So yeah, I think we've got an idea of everything there, really, what's going on. I want to hone in on that point about that the Prime Minister has basically suspended the tax rise. So Laura, I don't know how much you've looked into this one, but because initially Macron was adamant that tax was going to be raised, and they were not going to change the policy. They were going to stick to it, and even if 1 million people went out into the streets, they were going to keep this tax. What do you think has prompted this sudden change of course? Because they seem to have all of a sudden, in the space of a couple of days, totally backed down.
Well, it's been going on for 3 weeks now, and as you've said, the services are supporting it, or they're at least not, fighting against them. I mean, Katie Hopkins retweeted a few videos where it was the fire service and the police who were just walking away off the parade and saying that they weren't going to get involved in it. But 2/3 of French people backed the protest last week, and then this week that 66% is up to 72%, and the 85% are against violence, but 15% say that violence is justifiable. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I think that is a huge number. 15% of people saying that violence is justifiable. I think they've just, yeah. I mean, there'll be other people as well that won't admit it. I don't know how they were polled, if it were anonymous or what, but there will be people that won't admit it. It will be higher than that number. And I think that's a huge number, 15% of people saying that violence is justifiable. But some people are asking in the chat, like, how do we know that it's not just about fuel and it's more about a fight against globalism? It's just quite simply from the hundreds of videos that are all over social media of people being interviewed about why they're protesting. And people are just saying that they're sick of the multiculturalism, the globalism, they're sick of Macron. There was actually a video on RT Russia Today. I don't know if you guys saw it. I retweeted it a couple of hours ago. And it was a woman protester. And she was saying that France is ruled by the banking mafia. And then she said, Macron is just a pawn of Soros, the Rothschilds, and Goldman Sachs. And this is what people are saying that are protesting. So to go back to your question, because I've gone off on a bit of a tangent there, I think it's just been going on for so long now that he's got no choice, because he's got no support from his own kind of civil service as well. So that's the reason why, in my opinion.
Sure, and just to piggyback off your answer there, Laura, what I would say as to whether people are aware of the goings on, I would say that the protests are a sort of organic reaction to everything, because there are factions within the protests. They're small, but they that know what is going on, looking at the migration and globalism and everything. But the protest itself is a very good organic sort of sign, because people, the average person in France, is aware that the prices are living costs and everything, these fuel prices, everything is rising, and the quality of life is declining. So even if they're not directly aware of the exact reasons for that, they are responding to the consequences of this. So it's a good sign, these protests, that things are changing, and it's pretty poetic that this starts in France.
I heard a Frenchman, sorry, William, he was saying that, look at the crowd of people that are out there, the protesters, they're all white, they're all working class. Part of it's to do with the fact that Macron is purely for the rich, which is why I think it was the wealth tax that he got rid of. And they're also under the impression that the fuel hike is partly to do with the Paris climate change, because they want to drive down people using diesel, but also to pay for the increasing cost of the immigration problems they have. So there is the underlying theme that although it just looks like it's for the fuel, there's those reasons behind it as well.
Yeah, definitely. They're like, the reason that Macron is saying that he is hiking the fuel prices is so they can meet the climate change sort of requirements, so to reduce emissions and everything. But people, as you said, if you look at any video of the protest, it is mostly real French people who are protesting. And the reason why is because they are the actual taxpayers. We know from lots and lots of statistics that the migrants, the vast majority of them are just living off of welfare, and someone has to pay for that. And France, the French people, are the first in Europe to feel that, and this is the response. So,
yeah, I think with anything like this, you kind of see a natural progression where the protest starts initially about one thing and then it ends up about something completely different. And just going back to Laura's statistic that 15% endorse violence, and somebody put in the comments that JF in one of his live streams had commented that the ideas of revolution are much more prominent in the French mindset. And I think that's true. My mother has a saying about the French people, that they're always revolting, with a dual meaning, which, well, take from that what you will. Just before we carry on this, I just want to say to everybody listening, if you haven't already, can you hit like and subscribe below, because it really helps to get our numbers up. So if you enjoy our work, then please go and hit like and subscribe. I want to move on to something more contentious about the protests in France. Now, there was a video going around a week ago or so, maybe a bit sooner than that, that appeared to show snipers on the roof, and then there was another video which showed a man seemingly being gunned down by a sniper rifle. I don't know. I'm just going to put this to the floor. Did any of you see that? And do any of you have any more information about that you can give us?
I've not seen the video myself, but there are people talking about it in the chat. And I did see people talking about it on Twitter earlier today. I know that one person died, was it last week, because a car rammed into them, I believe. But I'm not sure about this sniper video, I'm afraid. It's definitely something that we could check out. In fact, if anybody in the audience knows a little bit more about this, feel free to send us a message and we'll read it out.
There is a video of the protester being shot as he was surrendering himself to the police that was put on a news website.
It might have been that one, because the video that I saw, it was going around in some of the Telegram channels, and it was basically a guy. He looked like I think he had his hands up, and then he was walking into the road, and then he just sort of slumps down. You know the video?
Oh, I've got it up now. But yeah, he's just walking up. He gets shot, and then there are reports of French police taking other positions on the rooftops. So there are videos of it going around.
Yeah. We'll definitely have to look into that a bit more, because it looked pretty sinister from what I saw. I don't know whether it was a ground police officer or the sniper, but there's definitely photo evidence of snipers in position. Somebody just asked in the comments if anybody had died. I'm not sure. Has anybody died yet? I know there's been a lot of injuries and there's been hundreds of arrests, but I don't know if anybody's died yet.
Oh, well, the current statistics are, I think, as many as 4 have been confirmed to be dead since the very start of the protests, like 3 weeks ago. And there's dozens and dozens of people injured. There were quite a few police officers injured. I read one report about, one officer suffering burns from all the car torchings. There's been stores looted in Paris specifically. Some protesters had the weird habit of trying to damage the pavement. I don't know why, but yeah.
Well, I mean, if this is just about a tax rise, then I'm a monkey's uncle, because you don't get this mad about a tax rise. You don't die for a tax rise, and you don't burn stuff. So it does seem to me that your hypothesis that this is about globalism, about Macron being the Rothschilds candidate, I think there's definitely some weight behind that, because people are behaving in a way that signifies the protests are about much more. And I think one of the best bits of psychology that I ever learned was, if you want to know what people believe, don't look at what they say, look at what they do. So they might talk
precisely.
So they might talk about tax rises, but the way they're behaving indicates that there's a lot more going on beneath the surface that we're not all privy to. So
exactly, this is also sort of these whole protests are going on for weeks now, and another one is scheduled. I'm not sure when, but this week. And it's also an opportunity. It's kind of weird to say, but this is part of human nature. It's an opportunity for people to really vent, because of all the things that are happening, all the factors that have been affecting us from, even as far back as the 60s, but specifically it intensified since 2015. It's an opportunity for people to just vent their frustrations and, protests, show the world that something is very wrong in Europe, specifically in France for the French, and they are reacting. It's organic. It's what I want to get across.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. And somebody put in the comments that people only seem to rise up, as it were, when there's a financial issue involved. And I think that's true, that it does tend to be tax rises and unpopular financial reforms that make people get out onto the streets. But as we sort of spoke about before, it always begins that way, but it ends up about something else entirely. So I think these things can morph and transform and evolve as time goes on.
Precisely. Our current world, it runs on money, it runs on finance more than it ever has. And money is something that affects everyone every day, and it's always in our thoughts. So it is always a potent sort of topic for politicians to talk about, but it's also like this is an opportunity for us, for nationalists, for just people who want to protect their homes, their countries, their civilizations. These economic sort of arguments seem to be, as we have seen with these giant protests, they seem to be the ones that resonate with people the most, and that get them to think about their immediate future.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think that there's another bit of psychology I'm just going to throw in there, that what people can withstand is relative. And a lot of times you'll see people like a quiet life, and they will tolerate their communities being swamped with Africans until it hurts their wallets, because then things become intolerable. When you've got money, you can build gates and you can hire security. When you've got no money, you're very vulnerable. So I think that that's part of it. So what I want to get onto next, to sort of finish off this issue, I want to ask Laura, what do you think happens next? Because these taxes are going to be scrapped, according to the French Prime Minister. But do you think the protests will continue because now it's become more of a referendum on Macron's leadership rather than anything to do with money?
Well, I'm not sure, to be honest. I mean, he is very, very unpopular in that country at the moment. I believe he's polling at around 26% favourable. So the country are against him. And as we said on the last stream, the top reason why they voted him in, was it last year, the French presidential election, was just because people didn't want Le Pen's party to win. So he's never really been that popular, but his popularity is just plummeting week after week. And I think they've had a little victory now, haven't they? Because they kind of got their own way a bit. They're getting responses from people. So maybe they'll get a taste for it. I don't know. But I've heard reports that it's spread to another couple of countries. I bet the UK will probably be the last people to start fighting back, because we're just so pathetic at the moment. But I just hope that this kind of enthusiasm and this passion that people have got continues, because we're not going to fix the Great Replacement by going to the ballot box and voting between two parties like the Conservatives and the Labour Party. I'm not encouraging violence at all, but I think we do need to show that we're pissed off, to be honest. And I don't know why we're not doing anything about Brexit in Britain, because 17.4 million people have been ignored. I think we've got a couple of questions about Brexit, so we might get to that in a little bit. But yeah, I'm not sure what will happen. I wish I could see, but I hope that people continue making it known that they're angry about things.
Well, I just wanted to throw in a few things there, because the last statistic I saw on Macron's popularity, he was polling at a horrifying 20%. So there's a white pill for you. Another thing that has sort of started to happen is these yellow, well, as in the media it's called, these yellow vest protests are sort of beginning to spill over into neighboring countries of France. We've seen some older people in the Netherlands doing a sort of mini protest like that. And yeah, the passion of the French is beginning to light a fire in the continent. And what we have to do is capture this genie in a bottle, and we have to fan the flames, figuratively speaking, of course. And we just need to make it happen in more places.
Yeah, I hope it does spread further. And I know there's I'm just going to move back to domestic British issues for a moment, because I know there's a protest march planned about the Brexit betrayal around Whitehall next weekend, I believe. There's been a suggestion that everybody should wear high-vis jackets, because it's a kind of a solidarity with the anti-globalist forces in France. And somebody's asked in the comments as well, actually, does Problematic Bob asks, have the yellow jackets answered the optics question once and for all? Well, I actually think there's a case there, because it's the media are struggling at the moment, and the Levantine media in the United States is having a difficulty with tarring these protesters as far right or far left, because they're not waving red flags and they're not waving swastikas. They're wearing yellow jackets. So it's very difficult for the media to pounce on and slander the motivations behind the movement. But I'm just going to briefly touch on the Brexit thing, because there's been a few people in the comments, and I know there's a lot of British people listening. Darren, do you think that unrest like you've seen in France has the potential to spread to the United Kingdom if there's a real betrayal of Brexit?
If what I've read in various groups turns out to be true, in terms of the Brexit march on Sunday, I know there are a lot of people planning to turn up in the yellow vests. One is a sign of solidarity, but also, as you say, it's part of optics as well, because there's nothing they can say about it. Although there is going to be a huge Brexit rally going on at the same time, it will no doubt spill into small pockets of violence towards the end of it, as it usually does. I think it will get to a point where people are, as you say, do just get pissed off with having their own choices being given to them and then taken away.
Yeah, I think these protests, especially in France and what's happening in the United Kingdom, is really highlighting the fallacy of democracy, I think. So now we've spoken about the French issue. I'm just going to have a look at some of the comments that we've had from people. Does Pyramid Builder Jr. asks, does this prove that EU/European governments are not immune to being overthrown when the native population gets upset enough? Boris, I'm going to put this to you. What do you think to that?
Just a moment. Well, if we look back at the Ukraine situation, just to mention that again, that government was sort of changed in a sort of coup d'etat, and I mean, it's not impossible, and of course we have seen it many times throughout history. I do think in France these are the beginnings of it. I don't think we're quite there yet, where we will have quote unquote revolution in the streets. Not quite. I know we all wish we were, because things are happening which will make things very difficult in the future, and we need people to wake up as soon as possible. But to sort of reframe the answer, I think we can learn from our French brothers and use these optics, shall we say, that they have created. This is perceived in the world as an organic movement of people just responding to a completely ridiculous sort of law from the government. So it's very much David versus Goliath kind of situation. And that's the perfect, it's kind of a perfect propaganda tool, if we want to say it in a realpolitik kind of way. It's a perfect way to frame our issues and to take it to the Brexit situation. It's a perfect way in which the Vote Leave campaign, the people who voted to leave, thank you, it's a perfect way for them to frame their current problems.
Well, this is actually quite similar to what happened in the around the referendum, because migration, I mean, most people who voted leave, it was mostly about not being able to control our borders, but the campaign managed to use economic issues and make those the primary concern, which detoxified the debate a lot, and I think made it easier for people to speak out against the European Union, say they were going to vote leave because they could talk about these economic issues. So I don't think it's immoral or anything for us to be saying, yeah, actually, we need to jump on the back of economic issues, because that's the weak point of the existing structure. That's the weak point of the established order, is the economy, because they're going to screw up eventually. The house of cards is going to come down. So that's, you know, you strike at the belly of the beast. That's the position you need to aim for. I'm just going to look at some more of these comments. There's another one about Brexit. Lewis Thorpe. Thoughts on what happens to Brexit after today's second referendum now seems inevitable. Laura, do you think we're going to have a second referendum?
I certainly wouldn't rule it out. So the House of Commons vote is the 12th of December, I believe. So it's this time next week. and it's looking likely that the MPs aren't going to pass it through. So what happens after that is anyone's guess, because we only have until March 2019, to which that's the point that we leave. And then obviously we enter the transition period, which takes us to December 2020. So we only have, I mean, it's December now, we've only got 3.5 months until we leave. So if this deal doesn't get passed through, then God knows what's going to happen. I mean, there's various options. We could have another referendum. I saw a load of idiot Remain voters saying on Twitter that the two options should be Remain or May's deal. So no option for the majority of people who actually want a clean cut from the EU. Another option is that we could have a general election. We could have a no-deal Brexit, or we could have Theresa May could be ousted and somebody else could take over. It could be a vote of no confidence. So God knows, the whole country's up in turmoil at the moment. This time next week, in fact, when is the 12th next week? Let's just have a look. Oh, it's Wednesday next week. So this time next week, we still won't know. But the week after that, we will. So we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time in British politics. And I think that's one thing I'd say to our British listeners is the victors in this struggle will be those who can harness the anger of the people, because there is a lot of palpable anger out there about what's going on with Brexit. And if people on the Leave side, we need to be able to take advantage of the upcoming instability, because there will be an incredible amount of instability. So we need to be able to take advantage of that and harness the anger of the people to effectively sort of fight back against what's going on. I think that's very important. I'm just going to, Earthling Carl says, plebs are too comfortable in the UK for any revolting, sadly. If they don't react with violence to the rape gangs, they never will. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't want to see violence, but you would think there'd have been a stronger reaction about the grooming gangs. It's been very quiet. Something interesting about that is that none of the families of the victims seem to say anything. One presumes they've had a visit from somebody carrying a copy of the Official Secrets Act. So I'm going to leave that one for a minute. Leandro Martinez, I have a question. What is Europe's, in general, opinion on Germany, raw and honestly? Right, I'm gonna just we'll play a little game here. I'm going to go around short answers. Boris, what do you think about Germany?
Deutschland über alles. I love Germany. Germany, just to tell you my perspective on it, Germany was one of the first countries to, actually, I think it was the first to recognize Croatian independence, and then it was the US of A, I believe. I may be wrong. I don't think I am. But, well, my opinion on Germany is one of the big four of the European greats. So it's Britain, France, Germany, and Italy. Germany, I don't know, I know German, I can speak German well. I love German culture. You know, Austria has had an enormous influence on Slovenia and Croatia, mostly because we were in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And, well, just to not reminisce on history and of how wunderbar Deutschland is. Right now, Germany, they're in a tough spot. Well, the last time I was there was a few years ago, and there were so many minorities, especially in the airports. I think people have noticed that a lot. Minorities seem to work a lot as airport staff. I wonder why. But there's a lot of anger in Germany at the current situation. We saw the sort of when the world held its breath moment, when those 200 sort of Secret Service members in Germany, like a month ago, were all arrested when they were planning a coup d'etat. So yeah, generally in East Germany, people are more opposed to what's happening because they lived under communism, and they, like the east of Europe and the southeast, they know what it's like and they don't want to go back, and all the more power to them.
Yeah, I mean, politically, I hope they dig themselves out of the hole they seem to be in at the moment. Darren, just quickly, your thoughts on Germany?
I think the problem with Germany is not so much the Germans, more about their fear of being honest with the public and the world at large, because they do have that history of where they've been shamed into being historical racists. I think that stops them from fully kicking off about what's going on at the moment. I know we saw, I think as it was mentioned just now, the protest a few weeks ago. I think the Germans haven't changed. It's just that they've been subdued, kind of like we are here to a degree.
Sorry about that. My computer froze and I couldn't unmute myself. So sorry about that bit of silence there, everybody. Yeah, I'd agree with the history of Germany. I think they're hamstrung by their own history in a way. But I mean, away from politics, I've always quite liked the Germans. I think they have a better sense of humour than most people give them credit for. There's a great anecdote that I was reading a book by a historian recently about Hermann Goring, and during the war, he said, if we don't win the Battle of Britain, you can call me Mayor, as in the surname Mayor, which is a very common surname, to basically indicate that he's no better than anybody else. Of course, they didn't win the Battle of Britain, and all of Germany took to calling him Mr. Mayor. So I do think they have a sense of humour. Laura, just quickly, what do you think about the Germans?
Well, I like the Germans. We share a lot of blood with them, and they're our European brothers and sisters. And cannot stand Angela Merkel, but yeah, I've got a lot of love for the German people. I totally think that they need to let go of their guilt from World War II. But yeah, other than that, I support them.
Yeah, me too. Somebody in the chat has just said, I've got to read this out. I'm sorry, guys. The spirit of Odin still resides in the Germanic people. Wholeheartedly agree with you, mate. I mean, we've got a bit of a divergence of opinion on the panel, but personally, I agree with you. What else have we got in the chat? Germans are kind people who have been taken advantage of. They have been taught to hate themselves. I think that's very true, and I think that's something we would all agree with and has been referenced in our answers. Just going to look at some more comments before we finish up. Jude McLean, the issue with London protests is that they always look pathetic due to the nature of London's demographics and politics and liberal media power. Laura, you're hot on demographics. Just for the listeners, I mean, what percentage of London is actually British these days?
So it was 44.89% white British at the date of the last census, which was 2011. So bearing in mind that it's now 7 years later, definitely under 40%, probably around 35%. Obviously, that figure doesn't count for illegals anyway, so it could be even less. I mean, I've been to London quite a few times this year, and I'm not joking that when I say I walk around and I look at people, it does seem to me like it's 2/3 non-white and 1/3 white. And then obviously those white people aren't all English anyway, because you hear lots of different languages being spoken. So yeah, London is, from personal experience and from looking at the official demographic figures, it doesn't feel like an English city anymore.
No, I think the only thing English about London these days is the architecture, and even that's being bastardized. I'm just going to look at another comment. I can't read out this username because it will get us banned, but a British person has asked, have you discussed Farage's self-imposed walk into the wilderness? No, but I'd love to get onto this. So, Darren, I'm going to talk to you about this. Nigel Farage, obviously, today we know he's quit UKIP, and in recent weeks he's been on all over the radio, the mainstream media, briefing against Jared Batten and trying to force a no-confidence vote in him and everything. I mean, what the hell is going on with Nigel Farage?
It's sad, really, to see the man who brought us what we wanted, i.e. Brexit, has now moved from the party that gave us it, essentially. His idea now is that he wants to set up a new party that is purely Brexit and sits between the Conservatives and UKIP. So he wants to get rid of the whole anti-Muslim side, which he's distanced himself from.
Yeah.
And he wants to go more mainstream. So he wants to pick up all the voters from across the board without addressing the other problem.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think during the referendum campaign, he got a taste for mass popularity. And I also think as well, and I'm going to ask you, Laura, about this because you've followed some of Nigel's stuff over the last couple of years. I often get the impression about Nigel Farage is that he's a bit jealous of the Tories. He's always wanted to be accepted by the establishment, but they've always treated him as a poor relation. And he seems to be trying at the moment to worm his way into the establishment. I don't know whether he's after some sort of peerage or what, but he really does seem to be agitating and trying to, saying to the Tories, please respect me, please, I'm a nice boy. Do you think there's a bit of that going on?
Yeah, definitely, because I used to be obsessed with Nigel Farage. You probably know that I used to worship the ground that he walked on. But recently, over the last, I'd say 12 months, he's just cooked on so many issues. He's just completely winding me up and doing my head in. It's at the point now where I can't even defend him anymore because he's just cooked so many times. But he's always been unliked by quite a lot of people, but he's always been loved by quite a lot of people as well. And if you look at polls, the top reason why people love him is because they say that he's a man of the people and he speaks up for the working class. But he's not doing that anymore. He's just not listening to what we want at all. And he's been told again and again and again on social media and in interviews and all sorts of things that people support Tommy Robinson. I know people listening, you guys on the panel might have varying opinions about him, but a lot of working class people do support Tommy Robinson. So Nigel Farage just seems to be going the other way, and he seems to just be kind of stood on his own, like kind of falling out with everybody that is being popular at the moment. Because as we know, UKIP is doing rather well under Gerard Batten. I think it's polling about 4%, isn't it? And it was about half a percent before he took over.
8% at the moment.
Oh, is it 8%? Well, that's gone up over the last couple of months. So yeah, I don't know what Farage is playing at, but it's definitely something behind the scenes, because for the first time in his career since I've been a fan of him, he's not listening to the people anymore. It's something else that's pulling his strings now.
It's interesting. Sorry, William. It's interesting that since Tommy Robinson was made or appointed an advisor, it's increased UKIP's membership by another few thousand. As you say, despite what you think of him, and he has his own way of dealing with things, which aren't always great. It does show that he does have a respect of a lot of people in this country, which Farage is wrong to ignore.
And most definitely, I think Farage is coming across at the moment as the wanker in the tweed coat who is ignoring the working class, the white working class, just like the establishment parties have done for a long, long time. So I think he's in danger of becoming not just irrelevant, but actually disliked by the people who used to support him. Somebody in the chat asked us if we disavow, do we disavow Nazism and National Socialism? We don't believe in disavowing on this channel. It's moral cowardice, and we do not disavow anything of any side of the political spectrum. So I hope that clears that up for you. We will not disavow anybody, even communists. Cara Mills, this is an interesting point. As said last week, the establishment of UKIP coincided with the rise of the BNP. So there is a school of thought which goes a bit like this, that when the BNP started to get really popular towards the end of the last decade, the last of the Brown years in the Labour Party under Gordon Brown, UKIP suddenly sprung out of nowhere, and the BBC are giving Nigel Farage airtime 24/7, always on Question Time, and Farage now boasts as being the man that destroyed the BNP. Now, obviously, he's got his own radio show. He seems to be getting a lot of airtime. Do you think he's being used? I mean, Laura, I don't know what you think about this. Do you think he's being used as a tool in order to destroy Tommy Robinson, Gerard Batten, and this new look UKIP?
Well, I think if he is, he'll have to have been offered something in return. So that's a potential option, I guess. We were saying that, something's happening behind the scenes and making him behave in the way that he is doing. So I guess if he keeps his side of the deal, which could be to, put a stop to all this, then maybe he'll get offered something in return. So potentially, I mean, I can only guess. I'm not sure, but I definitely do think that something is happening behind the scenes at the moment, because he's like a lone ranger, just out on his own, just saying things that nobody's agreeing with him. Apart from, I think, is Aaron Banks and some of the kind of financial backers are still supporting him. So Yeah, potentially. I mean, he will have to be offered something if he does that, and maybe it's financial, maybe it's a position of authority. I don't know. I mean, if we keep our eyes on the story now, and then we see that he is offered something next year, then I guess we can put two and two together and guess why he behaved in the way that he did.
Yeah, as ever, I think it'll be a case of following the money. So we shall see. But it's a very interesting theory, and I do believe there's some substance to it there. I do. So just before we finish up, I'm going to go around and just speak to each of you about what you want to see in the future in the France situation. So Boris, I'll start with you. What do you think the ideal resolution for the protests in France would be? Is that Macron going or changes in certain policies? What do you think the long-term aim of this movement should be?
Well, there's been a lot of talk about these protests being the sort of death blow to any hopes that Macron had about re-election, and that's definitely a convincing argument. As to what we want to see out of this referendum, well, there's sort of two sides to it, because on the one hand, it's good that the tax is there because it forces people to confront the situation, and if people see that the prices of everything have risen, then they'll ask themselves why, then they'll look into things, and eventually they will get to the origins of it, which is the ridiculous amount of money that's being wasted on migration and welfare. So in that aspect, it's good. The other aspect is we do want to see this tax done away with, and the protesters have sort of gotten halfway with that, with the moratorium. So I think ideally the protests continue until the people force the tax to be either removed or reduced, and in the process, people, just more and more French people, but in general Europeans as well, will become aware of why all the prices are rising.
Yeah, definitely. I think those are valid points to make about it, and we'll see what happens in the future. So, Darren, what do you think it would be the ideal situation, the ideal outcome of this kerfuffle in France?
That they continue protesting, that the rest of France wake up and see why they're protesting. As was just said, people read between the lines, Macron gets outed and Le Pen gets in, everyone's happy.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it will yield positive results for the National Rally, or as they're called now. Laura, what are your thoughts on this point?
Well, Le Pen is polling ahead of Macron at the moment, obviously because of his terrible approval rating with the people of France. But I guess the best case scenario is just for it to continue, and people need to realise the enemy that they're fighting here, because Macron is a very, very powerful man, and he has some very important, very rich people supporting him. So if they just back down now and let things return to the way that they were, then he'll just continue doing what he's doing, thinking that he rules the world and thinking that he can just control everybody and not give an ounce of thought to the little people. So I just want it to continue happening. As I said earlier, I don't encourage violence, but yeah, I mean, we've only just had a French election, haven't we? So we've still got a while until the next one. Are they every 4 years over there? Do you know, William?
Oh, I'm not sure about the French process. I think it's 4 years. Yeah,
well, it was only last year, wasn't it? So we've still got a while to go. But yeah, if the French people continue revolting, I guess the government are going to have to do something. They can't just ignore it. Yeah.
I hope so. On that note, I just wanted to say to the listeners that we're going to put a poll in the live chat, and it'll be in the comments underneath afterwards. We're considering adding a bit of background music for our live streams in future. So we just want to get your thoughts on that, whether you think it would be a good idea, and then we'll have a look into it if you guys think it's a good idea. So we're going to finish up now, but before we do, I'd just like to say thank you to our guests and, of course, our listeners for tuning in tonight. If you'd like to listen to any of our previous podcasts, they're all up on SoundCloud and YouTube. And if you'd like to donate to the project so that we can continue doing what we're doing, the links are in the description below to do so. So thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody. Stay safe.
Catch you next time.
See ya.